All right, we're going to start your exam now. You might feel a little pressure. Okay?
Oh, what's that?
It looks like Frogger Advanced. Now let's keep moving.
Doctor?
Oh, that's fine, nurse. That's just Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. Now, moving along.
Yeah.
Hey, is that Spider-Man?
Game Boy Advance, more games, more fun. Rated E for everyone.
Have you seen my shorts?
Welcome back to Retro Rebound. In today's video, we are going back to the little handheld that always could, the Game Boy Advance. Specifically, I have in my hand the SP, and I would not be the gamer I am today without this bad boy here to accompany me on many a trip, many a vacation, keeping me in touch with video games while I was forced to go outside and touch grass. But nonetheless, ladies and gentlemen, we're back with another buying guide. Our last one was on the PSP. Before that, we talked about the DS, and the DS, we did veer a little bit into Game Boy Advance territory with the original Nintendo DS, which of course comes with the slot here in the back that allows you to put in Game Boy Advance cartridges. So the obvious question you may be having with the Game Boy Advance in 2024 is, what option do you pick? And we have every single one to display here today. We'll go through each alongside pricing, and then I'll make library suggestions because collecting for the Game Boy has become a bit more complicated nowadays because of how developers are approaching back compat and collections and reselling. So we'll get into all of that. But ladies and gentlemen, if you're new here and you're into nostalgic, retrospective, buying guide content, any of that stuff, you're in the right place. Consider subscribing. First, let's help you pick out a Game Boy. Of course, I know we're talking about the Game Boy Advance mostly, but we do have to take a look at the Game Boy Color. Now, one thing that's fun today on the retro market is modding your Game Boys, right? This goes all the way to the Advance, but you'll see here, I do have a modded Game Boy Color. I did this on a video on Retro Rebound, actually one of our first ever, and you'll see, unfortunately here, I did mess up on the screen. So you see that it looks beautiful, but we do have this little blemish here, but it works perfectly otherwise. And I'm pretty proud of it for my first time attempting to mod a system, but the Game Boy Color is still great, especially if you mod the screen, because now it's backlit. You can play it wherever, whenever, and you can even slot it into, say, something like a really cool Pokemon carrying case if you're going full retro. But obviously with this, you can't access something like a Game Boy Advance game. This is one you're gonna have to leave to decide unless you are purely in it for the nostalgia, the legacy factor. Like, I have to play my Game Boy Color games and my Game Boy games on my Game Boy Color. Okay, then by all means, more power to you. This is running a little bit at a higher price on eBay than I expected at $50 to $70, and that's not including any mods. Like, just original functioning Game Boy Colors are decently pricey, I'd say. A lot more than I expected. So that's one option for you. Of course, there is the original Game Boy Advance. This is another modded one I attempted to do in my spare time. I was inspired by my boy Spawn Wave, so I got the same exact color scheme he did, kind of inspired by the SNES. You'll see slotted in here is Donkey Kong Country, and I got impatient with this one. So when you turn it on, you'll see, you can hear it, but the screen's flickering, nothing else is going on here. But the game does run in the background. Why this happened, I got impatient while modding it. You were not supposed to fold this one ribbon cable while you were doing it. I got impatient while doing it and said, what's the worst that could happen? Because I kind of stuffed together my Game Boy Color one, and you see the consequences of my action. So unfortunately, this doesn't work, but this is also like old reliable for a lot of people. And you can get great backlit options over on eBay or even retro vendors at conventions for around $190, $200 if you're really looking to splash. Otherwise, a Game Boy Advance in its original state is about going to run you the same price as a Game Boy Color. But of course, the benefit with the Game Boy Advance is that you can run Game Boy Color, Game Boy games, and of course GBA games on this. But the real winner to me has always been the Game Boy Advance SP. The price on this will vary depending on what shell you end up picking up, and there are great options available online for people who have like repacked these systems where you have a brand new shell on it, like this one here. This Game Boy Advance SP looks entirely legit in every way, shape, and form. I got it for $80 before the big COVID surge, but this is modded. You'll see when I actually flip it on, if you look toward the bottom of the screen, you can just see like where it's cut, where it was installed, which is not really the case, at least from my memory, when it came to other Game Boy Advance SPs like the ones I grew up with as a kid here. Inside this, you're gonna see we have Fire Emblem and the Sacred Stones. You may remember this from a callback to one of our GameStop unboxings, but you'll see here, you can turn off the backlight on and off. The beauty of this, of course, just little square, you can just fit it into your pocket, super portable, The backlit screen was huge, especially in revitalizing many games that we grew up with. Like, I remember sneaking this thing under my pillow. My mom had no idea. And I was like, yeah, that's right. So I was in bed asleep, actually playing like Pokemon in the Safari Zone, for God's sakes. It was awesome. So yeah, I have a lot of great memories with this one, but the shell is really going to be what costs you. And of course, the screen quality. On eBay, again, you're going to run up your price if you want that IPS backlit screen. It does add a lot to your game. Again, you'll see right here, we'll line it up side by side between these two. And you can just tell by the color, it's not even close. It's literally night and day. So this is the difference you're getting. I haven't even properly focused my camera or anything. So yeah, you can really just get a good immediate feel on what IPS does versus what like an original just backlit screen does. Maybe that doesn't matter to you, like $100 difference doesn't matter to you, and that's totally fair. Not trying to convince you, but just something you want to keep in mind for sure. Then there is the Nintendo DS, the original specifically, which comes with the Game Boy Advance cart. As long as you insert it in before turning on the system, you can fire this bad boy up and it'll play Game Boy Advance games on here. This is a great option if you're looking to consolidate your hardware side of the collection, right? If you're looking to consolidate your collection a bit on the hardware side of things, like you just want one handheld that can do it all, it's a little bit tough to find because when you go for the Nintendo DS, you can play your Game Boy Advance games. You can play your Nintendo DS games. Obviously, you forsake the 3DS part of your catalog, and that's why the new 3DS XL was my recommendation in the video we did on the Nintendo DS. However, what you do forsake by going with an option like this that you have in hand is you lose out on Game Boy Color, Game Boy games. And if that matters to you, then this does neuter part of your collection. I do think the best option you have available to you is the Game Boy Advance SP. If you were to ask me personally, between portability, the backlit screen, built-in good battery life, it's rechargeable. There's a lot of great reasons to go out and get a Game Boy Advance SP. But let's say you have a ton of money in your pocket. You're like, okay, man, all these options are great in that $50 to $100 pocket roughly, but I want to spend, and I want to spend big on my Game Boy Advance and Game Boy Color collection. Well, I have just the option for you. Let's say you missed out on pre-orders. If you got about $300 to spare, I will point you at the analog pocket, which you can see how bright the screen is. It literally blows out the camera. So we'll kind of keep it tilted like this. But yeah, this has a built-in screen that is absolutely beautiful. It will 100% change your experience with games you play on here. It can support Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance. There are also really cool modding tricks you can do on this thing to get the most out of your game library. This is my personal go-to for everything Game Boy, but it is a high price to pay, especially because Analog Pocket hardly restocks. And especially if you want to play this on, say, a TV or a CRT, you'd have to buy the dock, which runs you another almost $90. So it is a steep price to pay. However, you get the most modern version of Game Boy gaming available on the market that is reliable. I love my Analog Pocket. I know a lot of people have a lot of feelings about analog and how they kind of short stock their stuff. But if you do have the money and this sort of stuff does matter to you like it does to me, it's really tough to go wrong here. It's hefty, it feels good, the buttons are great, it's durable, like it's got everything, and it plays the games in the best I've ever seen. But if you're looking for a cheaper option, again, you can't go wrong with an IPS modding kit. It's cheaper, as I mentioned earlier. Also, though, you're putting the trust in your own talent, which many of you are way more talented than me. You've seen my struggles already with 2 modding jobs. So take that as you will. Best of all, you'll see here with the Analog Pocket, you can just put stuff to sleep. And that's just huge deal for me. So you can suspend these games, charge this, pick it up later, lose no progress, especially in games that have a lot of save points on the Game Boy Advance. This is a big deal for me. So yeah, those are my recommendations on systems you should pick up. I say Game Boy Advance SP, just as is if you're looking to save money and get most bang for your buck. But if you got a lot of money to spend, Analog Pocket is the place to spend, in my opinion. Now it's time for game recommendations as well as games that you should avoid. I'm gonna do games you should avoid first. All these are amazing games that you should play, but just because they're available elsewhere, and I wanna call those out first because the stack is much shorter, fortunately. So first one here is one that I have in a nice hard case, and that is Mega Man Battle Network. Now you already know, this is what I meant by saying I'm not telling you to not buy these games. This is one of my favorite video game series ever. I love Battle Network, but they did do the Battle Network Legacy Collection on modern systems. And I definitely think you should check it out, especially because you get all games, both versions, when they started to do multiple versions of them in one package. So it's just tough to go wrong there. This was a highly sought after game, especially in mint condition. It still is, but I'm gonna be real. It's never gonna be a version I play ever again. I have Battle Network Legacy Collection on Switch. I have it on PlayStation 4. I'm good. I will never touch my Game Boy Advance version outside of just memories and just picking it up and experiencing what a lot of my childhood was. But this is a game that I highly recommend you play, but you can get it for much cheaper with all the bells and whistles, quality of life enhancements, every version. And it's just way, way cheaper than something like this complete in box. Previously, in my opinion, Final Fantasy VI on Game Boy Advance was the best place to play this game. The reason you really don't want to nowadays is because you have a lot of the bonuses that you got from the Game Boy Advance version now packed into the Final Fantasy Pixel Remaster, which includes 1 through 6. So again, more bang for your buck in the collection. You also do get cheats that kind of help you get through tougher stretches of the game where you don't have to grind. You can increase the amount of money you get, the amount of XP you get, and all that stuff, which I think holds some people back from enjoying the older Final Fantasies because they were a little bit more grindy. They're a little bit more easy to get lost in. Random encounters or something you can turn off in some cases. So I do love Final Fantasy VI. It's one of my favorites. Highly, highly recommend you play that as well. But I don't think you need to get a Game Boy Advance and buy this game here. It is a great way to play it, but I think the best way to play it is Pixel Remaster. And Mega Man goes 2 for 3 here because we have Mega Man Zero, a phenomenal Game Boy Advance series. I adore these games. The way they continue off from the X storyline is brilliant, but you definitely want to play these on consoles. You know, having a modern controller, especially the save systems they add in, like there's so many quality of life enhancements in these games. Like Mega Man Zero is already one of the hardest games I played, and I played it in the modern way. To all of you who played and beat Mega Man Zero legit on your Game Boy Advance, I salute you. You are the elite among elite gamers. But those are the 3 I'm just going to tell you probably should hold off on purchasing on your Game Boy Advance. Now, if you go ahead and you buy these on modern systems, fully support that. But I would avoid these personally on your Game Boy Advance if you're looking to build out your library. So what should you buy is the question. Well, again, you got a lot of money to spare. This is the only one I don't have for this video complete in box because it's like $600, but I do have the cartridge in Dragon Ball Advanced Adventure. You'll find some really cool spin-off games here on the Game Boy Advance. This is a 2D beat 'em up focused on OG Dragon Ball, and it is one of the most expensive games that you can go after on the platform, but it is really good. It's one of the few times that I have just settled for solely the cartridge and said, you know what? I'm cool with this. I'm going to rock with this. I don't need a complete in box until I got a lot of money to spend one day, and that'll probably be never. So I stuck with it that way. But yeah, the art's beautiful. The beat 'em up combat's great. Another great suggestion is the One Piece Game Boy Advance game. That's another simple beat 'em up. It's also a little bit more pricey. But yeah, Advanced Adventure, if you got money to spend, is a good place to go. But let's get into some more niche selections here, shall we? This one we did a video on. It's one of our best surprises in the terms of performance on Retro Rebound. We still don't understand how it did as well as it did, but that is Naruto Ninja Council. There are 4 Ninja Council games, and in my humble opinion, Ninja Council 1 should be the only one you play. The amount of secrets and unlockables are plentiful. Like you get to have a Kakashi campaign you unlock. Naruto and Sasuke play totally different. They have different boss fights, different music. Like it really was, I feel, a love letter to Naruto in a lot of ways, and it was just compacted into a 2D side scroller. Wasn't perfect, but I adored this game growing up. And it was a big one for me because I picked it up at Circuit City, which is like one of my favorite places to go and get games as a kid. But Naruto Ninja Council 1 is a great pickup. And again, I think you can get away with just cartridges. You don't have to be like me and get the box and the manual because then you're going to buy the cases. And for games that aren't super expensive, you'll see here, they're kind of in a plastic case just to protect corners that were already slightly damaged based on what I bought. But obviously you saw for my Battle Network 1 that here it's in like a nice hard case. And that is because this is in like literal perfect condition. Like there's almost no whitening on this thing whatsoever. And so games that I feel really strongly about and are in really great condition, you'll see one more in this video, are right here in these types of cases. So that's the other thing with collecting complete in box for Game Boy Advance. You just want to be wary of the fact that there is an additional investment, if you want to protect them, that is, beyond your dollar. So all of these, for the most part, are in some sort of casing, except these next two. Funny enough, I'm looking at them right now. Mario Golf Advanced Tour. This is a role-playing golf game, and I love Mario Golf. Like, I know a lot of people didn't like Mario Golf on Switch, but I thought it was kind of great. Like, I had so much fun with it. I put like almost 50 hours into it. I played online with friends. We did like Mario Golf bets, but I get it. It gets away from a lot of what made this series special, and that is the role-playing elements. You know, creating your own character, upgrading your shot, the way you control the ball, the spin, all that stuff. Like, it's a brilliant game when it's really leaning into its role-playing roots. And so that's why this is still a fantastic pickup on Game Boy Advance. You really want to focus your energy on a library you can only access here on the Game Boy Advance because so many games have been ported off the platform. But this is one that I think will just remain stuck on the Game Boy Advance unless Nintendo really does something that surprises me. I can just totally see this comment aging like milk for some reason. I don't know why. But nonetheless, Mario Golf Advanced Tour is fantastic. You should definitely add this to your collection. Now, one thing that's really cool I've talked ad nauseum about, so I apologize if you heard me say this line before, is that Game Boy unlocked the possibility for you to double dip on some of your favorite games. So you would buy a game on PlayStation 2, and then you get the Game Boy Advance version, and they would be two totally different video games, and you just get more of what you love. So one of my favorite examples outside of Star Wars Revenge of the Sith is actually Lord of the Rings, The Third Age. So the original game on GameCube is a turn-based RPG, which is fantastic. And what do they do with the Game Boy Advance game? They decide, hey, why not just make Fire Emblem, but it's Lord of the Rings? And it's incredible. It's really, really a good time. But again, because I already enjoyed Third Age, this adds to it a little bit for me. There is that factor of, oh man, I get to double dip on this thing I already like. I get to see a new perspective on this game because that's how a lot of licensed games worked, right? They got bound into a contract. We needed to have a Game Boy Advance version for this. There's a huge market for it. And they had to make a totally different game because you couldn't squeeze that turn-based RPG into the Game Boy Advance. So it's really brilliant. I really think you should check it out, especially if you like Lord of the Rings. That's not to say it's better than the console version, but still pretty dang good. Next up here, we have an all-time classic. One that I hope someday Nintendo like partners up with, I don't know, Square Enix or something and does an HD 2D remake of, and that is Golden Sun. This is, alongside its sequel, one of the best role-playing games you can buy, if not the best role-playing game you can buy on the Game Boy Advance. You know, when you talk about games that you would buy on this system and go, oh my gosh, like this is a huge game packed on a cartridge the size of like my fingernail, this was what many people thought of, right? It was a big, long storyline. The effects on screen and combat were fantastic. There's just so much here that was great about it. It was, again, one of our first Retro Rebound videos we did where we talked about it in my playthrough of it for the first time a few years ago. And again, if you really like the first entry, then there's a sequel that you can pick up on Game Boy Advance as well. But Golden Sun is admittedly a little pricey, and you'll find that with some games complete in box because when they've been isolated on this system for so long, naturally the price just has to go up. I also got a shout out a recent pickup of mine, Sonic Advance. I'm not a big 2D Sonic guy, but Sonic Advance, and especially Sonic Advance 2, are really convincing efforts. We made a whole retrospective dedicated to the Sonic Advance games. No one watched them, but nonetheless, these are wonderful 2D Sonic games that if you were like, you've been on the fence with 2D Sonic in the past, these are great ones to try out. Take a flyer, buy the carts for them, see how you like them. For me, my eye opener was Sonic Superstars. I really enjoyed that, you know, the gimmicks with the abilities and whatnot. And then I was able to go back to a more OG, traditional 2D Sonic experience, and you get something really cool here. So I wanted to shout that one out. Next up here is one that, oh my gosh, Pokemon Pinball, Ruby and Sapphire. Now, I did buy this from one of my best friends. This is his copy, so I got to shout him out for letting me have this one. But yeah, this is one that absolutely earned its hard casing. It's in absolutely perfect condition, but we don't talk enough about how damn good Pokemon Pinball is. And so I'm going to do that right now. The music is just so memorable. Remember in the original Pokemon Pinball, you had to plug in like a AAA battery to get like Rumble on it or something. It was crazy. Like that cart in its size and its shape was such a statement. I was like, this game is important. And it always was. I loved playing Pokemon Pinball, and I loved it so much, I bought the sequel for it, for Ruby and Sapphire, which Gen 3 is my favorite Pokemon generation. So this is just like such a matty ass game. I love Pokemon Pinball. And this just adds on top of it here. They say, play pinball with your favorite Pokemon, shoot the pinball to find and catch Pokemon. And that was like the cool part, is just trying to catch all the Pokemon in the pinball version. And you have to catch over 200 of them. Like it's brilliant, man. This was my favorite era of Pokemon because, like I mentioned, after this, I pretty much dipped and went to Battle Network, but the art, the music, especially just spoke to me so much during this generation. It's always going to be forever ingrained in me. Like Little Root Town, that music, oh my God, like anytime I hear it, I feel like I just got slapped back to like second or third grade. Such an important generation of Pokemon for me. It's my honor and privilege to grow up during that time and to have the pinball game for it. Do not sleep on Pokemon Pinball. You heard it here first. Now, last set of suggestions here. They are a series, and I would be remiss if I did not call them out, and that is the Legacy of Goku series. Now, you may notice I have 2 entries here, and there are 3 in total. First Legacy of Goku game is Liquid Booty. Do not buy it. However, Legacy of Goku 2 is a game that brings a lot of emotion out of me because I love the Cell Saga, and I remember picking this one up during a hard time in my childhood. I know I don't mean to be TMI, but I remember picking this one up when it was a tough time, and it just really walked me through a lot. And so it's a very special game on that front, but just Dragon Ball, 16-bit art style, action RPGs, really speaks to my soul. And then when you throw on top of that Boo's Fury, which is an evolution of the combat, evolution of the exploration, you get a lot here. What I love about these games is you just get to live in the world of Dragon Ball, right? Like you had that feeling in something like DBZ Kakarot, but let's be real, it was a little surface level, just a little bit, because you'd go to like West City and there was nothing to interact with. You would just kind of touch down and see the sights and smell the smells, and that was really it. But in something like Legacy of Goku or Boo's Fury, you could talk to everyone, you could pick up side quests, you could level up, and I thought so much of that interaction is what I was looking for as a Dragon Ball fan as a kid. And there's really no Dragon Ball game like it to this day. There's one thing I hope Bandai does, it's that they make a Legacy of Goku collection and bring, yes, all 3 of them back, because I want to laugh at the first one again, but bring all 3 of them back. It's just such a special set of Dragon Ball games we got here. And also this one in particular, this one comes with a great poster. This one you actually see in the background of our Retro Rebound video. So yeah, shout out to the posters that these games came with. And so that does it. Those are my suggestions for the systems you should get and the games you should get. Now, admittedly, my Game Boy Advance library is a touch thin. You'll notice that there are very obvious suggestions missing here, like Pokemon Emerald, which I think is like the best Pokemon game ever. It's extremely expensive, especially complete in box. One day I want that. Also missing from my hardware collection is one of my desired grails as a game collector, and that is the Pokemon Yellow version of the Game Boy Color that came with the box and everything. I just think that's so beautiful. I can't wait to one day get that in my collection. But also, as you can see, I collect these complete in box. My space is kind of limited, so I'm looking for suggestions just like anyone else. If there's games that you think I'm missing here, call them out. I'm more than happy to expand my collection. I'm trying to loosen my grip a little bit on complete in box and just get some carts. You noticed a couple carts in this video for more pricey games and stuff, but I'm looking to embrace the cart life a little bit more. So if you got suggestions on GBA games that are missing here or Game Boy Color games, go ahead, throw them down below. Looking forward to seeing what you have to suggest. Other than that, take excellent care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next Retro Rebound. Peace out.